Hi, this is K.N.Fitzwater and you're watching my channel, and it's good to be back. I have been working on my House of Seven Sons for about a month and a half now, on top of everything else that's been going on in my personal life, and it's so great to take a break from social media. And I want to say thank you for your patience in allowing me to take this break so I could do some writing. A lot had happened in my personal life, which would have been a lot more stressful if I added on the social media on top of my writing. So I want to say thank you for your patience and waiting for this new video upload. I am a third through with my writing on this draft, and it feels great to be able to accomplish that amount in 1 month. And I hope to continue on for the rest of the year with this draft as I'm querying, as I'm doing these YouTube videos and all the other social media stuff. So without further ado, we're going to start this video about editing. And most of this series is going to be talking about writing craft and editing. This is the nitty-gritty details I had mentioned when I was going through the Pantser method back in last year in the fall and winter. So we're kind of picking up where we left off, where we're talking about editing. Oh, square. Hi. Come on. Good boy. Yeah. You want to come in my lap? Come on. You go do it. Okay. Squeaker decided to join us. This is my kitty cat Squeaker. Say hi, Squeaky. Hi. No, you have no clue what's going on. You don't know what YouTube is, but it's okay. Editing. It's a necessary evil in writing. It's a whole part and parcel in becoming a better writer and to re-hone your writing craft and your storytelling. And it's something that all writers do, even those who are in the top 5 publishing ones have done self-editing before they even send it to the editors or their agents who send it off to the editors. So why editing? If you are very anti-editing, it's going to help make your storytelling dramatic. The utilization of story theory is going to help restructure your story where it's going to cater to the wide general audience, or the audience that you are catering to, such as young adults or those in lit fiction. You could take some of these basic functions to make it entertaining or engaging to the reader, so that way they could go from beginning to end. It's going to make your storytelling dramatic and stand out. Another way for editing that can be used as a great tool is that you're going to have new ideas as you go back into your story. What did not work in your first draft is going to give you opportunities to challenge your creative mind, to come up with new solutions that's going to make things better in your story. For instance, you realize that you have not had the villain interact with the hero as often as you should. It's something you had noticed when you do your raw reading and you realize, oh, they really haven't been interacting. So find a place or two where they do interact with each other. What happens in those interactions? How is it going to change the rest of your story? And how that change in your story is going to be tied into the rest of the storytelling. That interaction is going to bring tension. It's going to create drama. and it's going to change your flow for the better. So this is going to help your creative mind come up with new solutions, new ideas, that's just going to make things juicier. It's going to be so much fun. And last but not least, as you are editing and utilizing story theory into your writing, you are inevitably become a better writer. You're going to start honing your own style, the way you do things, and you're going to create your own voice. Voice is simply how we as an author choose what we put down on the page, what we are describing, what we are allowing the reader to see, and how we phrase things in the sentences. It's that big, huge mixed bag that makes us who we are as an artist. Most people like voicey manuscripts because they like the narration as being its own character. You as an author is a character in the storytelling, so what minute suggestions you may have put down or opinionated words is going to create flavor in between the dialogue and the action and all the events that come thereafter. And the only way to hone your style is to keep doing writing and creating stories, and editing is just going to help be part of that process. Is there a downside to editing? Yes, because you could easily edit out something that is working. That's probably the only danger to the whole editing process, is cutting out something that works and filling in something that may not be as useful as it should. So how do you avoid the pitfall of removing something that's good and replacing it that's just something worse? You have a plan, and that plan is utilizing the story theory as a checklist and see how your manuscript shaped up. And we're not doing an outline. If you already have an outline and you're trying to use that as a checklist to look at your manuscript, you're doing yourself a disservice. You have to approach editing with clear eyes, objective eyes, eyes of a reader. If you're using your old outline that had helped you create this draft, you have to put that aside and look at your actual manuscript. Manuscript. If you have to print it out and highlight and take notes and do all sorts of writing in it, go for it. Okay? If you have to do it on the computer and do those highlights and put notes in your journal, you could do that too. But work with your manuscript. Don't work with your outline. Your outline is just simply a way to help your anxiety to get a hold of itself so that way you could put words on the page. That's what that outline is all about. To help arrange your words and your thoughts together in a cohesive manner so that way you could do your drafting. Don't use your outline for editing. It's done its job. Work with a manuscript. The second thing I'm going to tell you is to become objective with your manuscript. Your manuscript deserves a cold reading. You may think that you already know how to fix your manuscript the moment you hit the end. But I'm going to encourage you to stop and take a step back and work on something else. Work on a poem, short story, a novella, something else. Or you could just enjoy the holidays with your friends and family, doing nothing else. But if you're a writer and you have to write something, work on something else other than this story. Do not continue on the series if this is a multi-series story. Just work on a completely different tangent. It's going to help you. This is going to help you become more objective when you go back to your manuscript. If you're looking at your manuscript and you think, this is the greatest thing in the world, this is, God among man, I am absolutely awesome, you do not take long enough to become objective. There are mistakes involved. There is something wrong with this and it needs work. Go ahead, put it aside, come back to it in another week. Or another month. 3 months. Give it time to sit. Even just 1 week is going to help you think differently than an immediate edit. So step back and wait. Now, you had waited. You finally are going to read your manuscript. Do not write anything yet. Do not put down a list or anything. Because we as a society know what a good story is, what is a bad story is, and you are well versed in reading multiple books and have watched movies or read comic books, you have a really good idea what is a good story or not, what flows and what doesn't in general. By being an avid reader, you know what's a good book. So when you do a cold read on your first draft, you're going to see mistakes. If you're seeing mistakes, congratulations, you finally made yourself objective enough to work on your manuscript. After you are done reading your manuscript, you're going to step back and think, what are the major things that really stand out to you that you just don't like? Is it the plot? Is it the characters? Is there certain sections of the book that is very slow and drawn out to you? Is it the stilted dialogue? Was it a very bad beginning and things are finally picked up at a certain area? When you are done reading the whole manuscript, you put your thoughts down. No different than a beta reader or a critique partner. You have a general issue with the book. So you put down what your issues are. Then you look at this list and you come up with a solution. Maybe you need to have your villain interact with your main character. Maybe you started off the wrong place and you need to cut out the beginning, especially if it's a wake up or dream sequence. If it drags, it needs to go. So from those personal notes, you are going to see a solution come out, and it's going to be a multi-pronged solution. Now, if you still have issues coming up with a plan just from this list alone, I have a editing list that will help you. I found this list from a blog, an editor's blog, that was meant to help other editors to start thinking about how am I going to help this author make a better manuscript? What are the issues I am seeing that needs to be done? So this was meant for an editor to an editor, but this can be utilized by you and me. So once you make your list, you're going to have to organize them into key sectors. You're going to organize them according to plot, issues with plot structure, if you know your story theory. If you don't, there are videos out there on YouTube, there's blogs about it. There are different types of story structures. But in general, you have a beginning, a middle, and end. The beginning helps set up everything to where the character is going to project themselves into the middle arc. The middle arc is all of their trials and tribulations in obtaining the thing that they're wanting, and the trials and tribulations from finding the thing. And even if that thing is a person or an idea or a physical item, it could be anything. It could be a new piece of information they never thought of before. It could be them being transformed completely into what they should be. Like Cinderella finally went to the ball and finally met Prince Charming. That's at the very middle of the story. From the trials and tribulations and being beaten down by the antagonist or the antagonistic forces, from obtaining the thing, they pick themselves back up and then they charge into the third act. In general, they have a plan and they have ways to resolve things and fix things because now they have an energy to do so. That plot structure is generic. And you are going to have your own flavor in doing however you want with your beginning, middle, and end. But it is that vague for a reason, because it's going to cover all genres of all stories. And you don't mess that structure up. It's like messing up your own skeletal structure. So anything pertaining to plot events or plot holes or anything that's just not jiving, put that down. Anything that ties to character development, you could put that down as well. That character development is closely tied to the plot structure. So I have a couple of videos of those. You could check them out right there at that little circle. I have 2 videos concerning plot structure, or at least how I approached it, and the character development arc that I had mentioned during the pantsing method. If you want to go further, there are some questions that you could think of about plot. Is there enough story to go to the final page? As in, is it engaging, is it inevitable, or believable, or all the above? Is there enough content to help carry from beginning to end? Does the story seem to end at the beginning, or does it seem to end in the middle? And you're just throwing in fluff as you go. So that's what it's taken care of. Is there enough juice? Enough reason for the character to go there? Are there major plot issues, and have they been resolved? Usually the character is going to have a motivation. This is going to carry them to obtain their goal. Have they obtained that goal in this book? And have they used that to resolve whatever issues that was going on? Are there hooks? Are they logical? Do they relate to the rest of the plot? And is it introduced in an engaging way? This is talking about your beginning. You have to start the beginning in the right place. You don't want to open up with a dream sequence. You don't want to open up in a wake-up sequence. You want to start when the character is already in action. Or the plot is introduced by minute characters that eventually will lead the reader to the real players of the story. No different than George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones. That book started out with very minute characters that eventually meet and interacted with the main players of the book. George Lucas did that with the New Hope movie, where we follow R2-D2 and C-3PO, and their journey lead us right up to Luke. So it is introduced in an intriguing and an engaging way. You can use that method if you so wish. If you don't have that, that's okay. There are other ways to go ahead and introduce the plot in an engaging manner. But usually you start when it's in the action scene or sequence and not the reaction sequence. If you want to learn more about that, I have that video right there. You could click on it. Another things you should also consider is, has it been focused? Is it scattered? Was it satisfying? Is it thin? Or is there too many subplots? Is there too much fluff? So these things are going to jump out at you when you realize that there are some places that are going to drag, and there are some things that are happening that happens too quickly. And that's because you space it out with all this fluff that's not necessary. The rule of thumb is that, am I getting from point A to point B? And is point B is going to lead me to point C, and D, and E, etc. So how are we moving throughout the story? What's propelling us? That is something you should be asking yourself as you are editing. Are we getting where we need to be? So that is plot structure, and if those are the issues that you are seeing, you have a really good task ahead of you to go ahead and restructure it based on those questions. If your plot is very well done, and this is not your first rodeo, and this is like your second or third story down the pipeline, and you pretty much have a good idea about plot, you could take a gander at your characters. That's the next thing on your list, is characters. Not only you need to look at your characters' growth, you need to make sure that they are 3D. As in, they are not only relatable, they have a motivation, and their actions seem logical, at least by their perspective. What is their motivating factor? Is it tied to the inciting incident? And is that motivating factor strong enough to propel them into the story? And as the story progresses and they attain what they really need, how does that chain of events occur and develop their character as they go on? Some questions you're going to have to consider. Is the lead character interesting enough for the story? Do they have a sufficient motivation that's going to propel them through the story? Are they flawed? Do they have some strengths? Don't make them a Mary Sue, or don't make them uber perfect, uber popular, etc. Not everyone is going to like this character. That's why we have antagonists. And not everyone is going to hate this character. That's why this character has friends. This character is going to find a place within the society. We need to know what that place is. And the only way we know that place is through their flawed character. And just as important as the main hero is the villain or your antagonist. What is it that makes them a great challenge for your hero? I know this is a very fictional viewpoint, but this can be tied to romance. This can be tied to mystery. It doesn't have to be tied to fantasy. You don't have to have a mustache-twirling villain. You could just simply have someone that has an opposite goal or the same goal, and the main character is in the way. They're an obstacle, and they will go ahead and make some choices that goes counter to the main character's goals and wants. and thus create obstacles. So you need to create an antagonist that fits the bill. So not only you're working up your main hero, you're looking at your villain. And all the characters in that story is going to either help the hero or help the villain. And there are going to be obstacles to either one. Any of my new characters that doesn't deal with the plot of the story is going to be in the background. And that's where they belong. Character development and theme is strongly tied to the plot structure. So if you're worried about the development of the character, look to your plot structure. That motivating goal is going to help propel the plot events, and those plot events are going to help the character react and regroup and think about their life choices. And those choices are going to help create new events as they occur. They're tied. We're going to dive into that a little further, but after this video. So you put down all the issues you see in the plot, you put down all the issues you see in your characters. This is the whole book issue. If you have a lot on your plate as it is, great. Go ahead and stop right now and work on it. Create what issues you see in each part of the chapter that you created, or any chapters you have to remove, and make yourself a list, a kind of guiding post as you go into editing. If you don't have a lot to worry about because this is not your first rodeo, let's go ahead and continue on. So setting. Is it appropriate for the situation that the character is in? As in, does it match with the theme that you have in your story? Is it a barren desert for issues that seem distraught or lacking substance? Or is it lush garden and there's intrigue going on? Is it sufficient? Is the Edwardian period set in a Edwardian country house? Is it proper for the story? It's not going to be set in American Western. Setting is just there to help you combat the blank page. Are the characters interacting with the environment? Are they using that environment to their advantage, etc.? Is there a way to use that setting to influence the mood of the story, or help gain the plot, help propel the plot further? And that's all you have to worry about the setting, really. Just make sure that you're avoiding the blank page syndrome, where you only have dialogue, you have the characters interacting with each other, and you just kind of have this void. So that's something you have to keep in mind as you go through your editing process. Which areas have the blank page syndrome? And make sure it's appropriate for your story, whether it's historical fiction or a fantasy. Also look at your dialogue. Make sure that when the character says something, it helps move the story forward. It's not like, oh, hi, Grandma, you're the best person in the whole wide world. I love you dearly. What are you doing here? It's not so stilted, it's not forced, it is natural. And another key thing is try to make sure each character sounds different. Best way to think about how different each character is by where they are in dialect, or where they are in each region. In America, those in the South speak longer and slower than others. in class, there are certain diction and certain phrases that people in the upper classes use than the lower class. Lower class people are more likely to curse and very blunt than the higher class people. They have a delicate way of saying things, usually. Don't worry about conversational niceties. This is a book here. People don't want to say, oh, hi, how do you do? You know, they don't care about that. They care about the plot, things gotta move on, etc. And look at your dialogue tags. Is there a way you can remove them? Is there a way to streamline the dialogue? Because that's what dialogue is. It's just to help streamline things and get things rolling. If the character is going to interact with the environment, it's going to show the in between the lines of what they're saying and how they're doing things. And you have to showcase it if the character observing it is going to notice this. If they don't notice it and they don't care, don't put it down. So we could talk about dialogue later if you so wish, but keep dialogue tags in mind and making sure it's not stilted if that's something that's a problem to you. And scenes. Scenes are just simply helping people go from point A to point B. Scenes could, they don't always correlate with chapters. Chapters are not scenes and scenes are not chapters. A chapter could easily be one scene, but a chapter also could be a sequence of a series of events. And the best way to get a character from point A to point B, whether it is a new information or an obstacle they overcome, it's also an emotional change. This isn't a requirement in film, where you are limited to how many scenes you put into your film, or the script you're writing. In books, we have plenty of options for us to do so. We have about 300 plus pages to put things down. For a screenwriter, they have about like 120, roughly. It could be less or more, depending on what type of movie length they're going for. But in general, they have less, and so this tip is going to help you. However this character comes into that scene, they have one certain major emotion, whether they're mad, sad, glad, or scared. As the scene progresses, they switch from that emotion to a different emotion of that set. So if they stomp in hopping mad, they cannot stay mad at the end of that scene. They have to be afraid or happy, or they're going to be sad and depressed. There's going to be different variations of this major moods, and these can easily be resolved by looking at the mood chart circle that's been floating around on the internet. That emotion chart is going to help you figure out what type of emotion I'm dealing with, so that way you could change it to a different emotion, or a checklist if you have to. So a scene has to have a purpose. It has to change something. Whether it's an emotion, a piece of information, they obtain an obstacle, or they finally made up their mind. So that is what that scene is. It's getting the reader point A to point B. Oh, and the next thing you have to think about is POV, point of view. There are different types of point of views you could do. You could do in third person, where the narrator or the omnipresent one is looking down on these characters and just talking about what they have done and how they interact with each other. You can have different levels of this And you can limit your scope however you so wish. But in general, the third person view is where you are referencing he, she, they pronouns. They did this, she did that, he was upset. You don't want it right that way, but those are the pronouns you'll be using. Second point of view is pretty much something that most games use, where they are adventure fuel text games where like, okay, you enter this room is dusty, dirty, there's blood on the walls. You hear the creaking noises in the room next to you. What do you do? And you have a list of options. Those are second point of views. They help guide the reader to make choices and to keep you on in the story. First person point of view is simply the character themselves is narrating what is happening. So in Moby Dick, Ishmael's relaying a story that had occurred. You could easily have a story where it is happening as they go and they're just talking to you as things occur. You have a different POV when you are doing a comic book. Most comic books are third person viewing. They don't really interact with you unless it's Deadpool. Deadpool may do something with you, I don't know. It may become first point of view when they themselves are narrating the sequences that occur in the text bubbles. So how do you know that it is right or wrong? If you find yourself head hopping, you may want to do a multi-character POV. And you have to figure out which character of that scene or that chapter is the main focus or the main observer of the event. And the best way to do it is when their mental thoughts help contribute to the events that go on, or something that occurs that happens to them. Those are usually the best ones to have a POV. And you want to make sure that in that POV, they only know the information that they have received throughout the story. If for some reason they know something that they technically should not know, that is interference. And you need to remove that information. And you need to see how the story is going to take place without them knowing this information. You need to guide that along. And you can also use the change of POV if you want to be closer to the action. What type of distance do you want when you read this? Do you want to have it first person? Or do you want to step back because you have multiple characters that you are going to be focused on in the story? You can technically have a multi-character first-person POV, but you have to state it and be very clear in each opening. And that's difficult. That's very difficult. I recommend that if you do first-person POV, you stick with that character throughout the whole book. If you're going to be switching between characters, do a third POV. And now we're getting to the more nitty-gritty details. This is within the scene. So pacing. If you take care of your plot structure, you're going to take care of most of your pacing problems. If your plot points are lining up where they should be in the whole arc, your pacing is now going to be scene by scene. So, in general, you want your reactions to have a similar pacing to your action scenes. Your actions should be generally fast-paced, and then your reaction should be a little bit slower. But they should at least equal each other to where the plot points hit where they should be in your character arc, in your plot arc. So if you are writing a list and you remember that there are certain scenes that are very slow and they seem to drag on, put that down. You may have to cut them out or reduce them somehow. Or there may be some other parts of the story where they can be enhanced, where it really is feasible to keep that for that long. But in general, you want to minimize boredom as much as possible, and pacing is going to help you. And if things went too quickly, you'll want to make sure you put in enough material to help spread it out. You don't want to be so fast where they can't see straight. So put in some more details about the setting, put in more thoughts, put in more descriptions of what's going on. And lastly, just make sure there is enough conflict. Is there enough conflict between the character and the antagonist? Is there obstacles they have to deal with? Just because they have a want and need doesn't mean it's easy. They have to fight for it. And once they have it, they have to fight to keep it. And the villain is going to be smart. And they're going to do things to go against the character. And eventually, you want the ending to where it is satisfying and the conflict is at its maximum, where it really is the deciding factor. So is there enough tension in all levels? In book level, in chapter level, and in scene level? And if you don't know what that tension is, I have a video about it. You could go ahead and click over here. It will help you out. The rest of it is going to be the nitty-gritty details, such as accuracy of the information you have given, making sure all your facts line up, especially if you're doing historical fiction, especially if you're doing a time period that everyone's going to know, you know, the 50s. Everyone's going to know the 20s because they researched this. This is something they love. So you're going to have to make sure you are accurate. Is the fighting, if this is a fantasy, is the fighting accurate? Are you detailed enough where they're able to follow along? Is the magic system a good system? Where is it drawing from? So that's something you have to consider. Time issue, timelines. If character A is doing X, what is everyone else doing in that time? And is there any conflicts in that timeline? And of course, you need to show more than tell. Pretty much you have to remove any sentence that seems to explain everything. Like, he walked into the room and then he sat down. That doesn't help. You need to show a little bit more. As in, okay, they walk into this room, this is what they see. This is where you get to describe the setting. Then they notice their friend. You could talk about their friend, what their thoughts are when they see their friend. Then they go over to their friend and then something happens. So that's how you show more than tell. And if anything, you could easily remove it. And last but not least, if you have a very thin list and you think that everything is all good, don't forget about your emotions. Make sure that it's enough to make the readers feel it, enough to where the characters feel the emotions, and they're able to change their emotions from one scene to another, and you keep changing that dynamic. That way it is more dramatic in the story. So let's go ahead and recap. First, you have to make sure you are objective, so that way you can interact with your manuscript in a non-personal way, so that way you could see the mistakes. Make a list of the mistakes that you are seeing at the end of your reading. This way you won't overwhelm yourself with the nitty-grittier details of the manuscript. You're going to tackle the big issues first. And I hope you like this video. If you do, please give this a thumbs up. I hope this was helpful. Let me know down in the comments what issues you want me to discuss further. I am only going to do this once a month due to some life changes. It's not bad. It's just a little bit more on my plate now, so I'm going to have to reduce my social media time. So let me down below what you would like to see next in March. What issues that you want me to go over that my previous videos haven't really helped. And I will be able to rework them and or talk about them and help you out later. Until then, go ahead and hit subscribe. I have plenty of videos that you can look at from my previous years. If you want to make sure that you get my next video, go ahead and hit that bell. It's going to alert you when I upload it in March. And you can always follow me in my other platforms. I have an Instagram account and I'm on Twitter. I am no longer doing Facebook at this time. Facebook is a little bit more bloggy, and if I am going to blog something, I'd rather do it in a video format. But I do use Twitter to update where I am in my writing process, and if you want to drop a line there, you could do so. And I can follow you later.